Let's check the stock market while people are streaming in here. And Tesla's way up. SPY is up. Looks like things are up. Bitcoin is up. Rumble is up. And NVIDIA is up only a little bit. Thought it would be more. All right, let's get some comments going, and we'll give you the show you damn well deserve. I know you do. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take this experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a Tecker chalice, a stein, a canteen, jug, or flask, or vessel of any kind. Also a cup or mug or a glass. I should read from the top line, maybe not start from the second line. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure of the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better. It's called the simultaneous sip, and it happens right now. Go. So good. Oh, I see the complaining has started. We got complaining, complainers. All right. So last I saw, no pope has been selected. Only the black smoke is coming out of the little chimney. Did you know that they add the chimney just for the picking of the pope? It's not there all the time. So now you know. So black smoke means no pope has been selected yet. Did you all see the meme on the internet of orange smoke, orange smoke coming out of the chimney, suggesting that maybe Trump had been picked as the pope? That's a pretty good meme. Well, I hadn't mentioned this, but you probably saw the story that there's a very large new statue that's been added to Times Square, and it's a black woman. So I believe the idea was to celebrate black women. And but here's the problem with the black woman statue. It turns out that, like most things, everything turns political, and um, the Republicans don't see color, at least not in the same way. So I saw some people in the comments this morning calling it the fat lady statue. Now, I'm not judging, and I don't do fat shaming because I don't think people are fat because they want to be. Um, but that's as big a fail as you can get if you put up a statue celebrating black women, and half of the country calls it the fat lady statue. Oops. Maybe they should have done a little market testing before they went with that model. Anyway, good try. Um, apparently, there's another UFO sighting, according to the Daily Mail. There was an alien ball that apparently dropped into Colombia. So they have video of it, traversing the sky, but then they actually captured it. Now they're looking at it, and I don't believe a single part of this story, but it's funny that it even exists. So it's a weird metal sphere, and it's made of 3 dense layers and has a chip-like core, they say, and 18 tiny microspheres inside. No welds, no seams, and no signs that humans built it. It's cold on the outside, but reportedly hot on the inside. How do they know that? I'm not sure. And it may have vaporized water. And has perfect internal symmetry. And even better, it's allegedly etched with ancient runes. And AI says the message is about unity, energy, and transformation. Do Do you think AI successfully translated ancient runes from another planet? Or maybe it's not from another planet. Maybe it's part of that ancient civilization on Earth that's been hiding in the ocean. Anyway, I'm going to put that in the category of I don't believe a single part of it. Well, let's check and see if there's any science that I can debunk. According to Discover, there's a therapy that's targeted at controlling emotions to help ease chronic pain. So they used a type of therapy on emotions, and they found out that it seems to make a big difference in people's chronic pain. Well, I'm going to give you the hypnotist take on that. It might be that it's exactly what it looks like. That if you get rid of people's emotional pain, it gives them some relief over their physical pain. Because as I tell you way too often, your brain and your body are really the same thing. We just artificially treat the brain like it's separate because it's in your skull, but it's all kind of one big brain. Your body and your little nugget inside your skull. But here's my question as a hypnotist: is it possible that what really happened is that they hypnotized some portion of the people they were doing the therapy on? Here's how easy it would be to hypnotize them. We're going to do a thing where we talk to you, and it's going to be a bunch of scientists, really smart people, and we're going to see if it eases your pain. That's it. You could have frauds, just actors coming in wearing like scientific clothes and having glasses and clipboards and stuff, and probably you would have a big impact on the number of people who said, yeah, you know what? That therapy really helped me. My emotions are better and my pain went way down. So I don't know how you would do this experiment unless you could somehow reduce the accidental hypnosis. And the accidental hypnosis would just be the suggestion that it might work. It's sort of a placebo effect on steroids. One of the tricks of being a hypnotist is if you want to do it professionally, you need to get an office and wear a suit, and you have professional furniture, and you even put your diploma on the wall. Because if somebody walks into that environment and it looks all professional and somebody spent money on it and there's a diploma, they will get hypnotized much more easily than if it was just your neighbor Bob. Hey, Bob, I hear you're a hypnotist. Yeah, just sit on this dining room table and I'll hypnotize you. That would still work. If Bob is good at it, that would still work. But we were trained that you should make it look like it'll work because it makes it easier. Here's one. Maybe they could have just asked me and saved a little time. According to the University of California in LA, that people who are curious, it might help them stay sharp as they get older and keep them from getting Alzheimer's. Do you believe that? That people who are curious are more protected against Alzheimer's? Yes, that would be compatible with everything that's ever been tested about people who might get Alzheimer's. The more you use your brain, the less likely you get Alzheimer's. That's one of the most commonly studied things you've ever seen. So, of course, people who are naturally curious are going to spend more time doing intellectual things to satisfy their curiosity. So did they really need to do a study to find that curious people are more protected from Alzheimer's? They did not. They could have just asked me. I would have saved them a lot of time. Yes, curious people, they would use their brains more. We're pretty sure that using your brains more protects you from Alzheimer's. Yes, it will protect you. You got it. There's another study. Eric Nolan is writing about this in SciPost. They found that men tend to look at women's mouths when rating their attractiveness, while women focus more on men's eyes and hair. Now, this again might be exactly true, but I have questions. Question number one: did the women, and they were looking at photos, I believe they were looking at pictures, not actual people. Did the women in the photos, were they all wearing makeup? In other words, were their eyes all tricked out with eye makeup? Because one of the things I've noticed is that pretty much every woman's eyes look pretty good if they have eye makeup on. I don't even know the words. What are the right words? Eye makeup, fake lashes if you need them, that sort of stuff. So it seems like it's a little bit unfair because it's unusual to run into anybody whose eyes are special. I've seen it. My last ex-wife had world-class eyes, the kind that give you 5 million followers on Instagram. But it's unusual. Your average person just has good eyes. Your average woman just looks great. Their eyes are just perfect. So looking at the eyes isn't telling you a lot. But here's my speculation. I believe men are trained not to make too much eye contact because it's intimidating. What do you think? If you're having a conversation with a woman, especially one that you don't know well, would you spend most of your time looking into her eyes? Let's say there wasn't some romantic connection there. Or would you sort of just naturally know that as a male, it's intimidating to do too much eye contact? I look at the mouth. And the reason I look at the mouth is because it's usually moving. So it's something to look at. And I do make some judgments about the mouth. But some of it is I just don't feel comfortable making too much eye contact because I think the other person would get weirded out by it. Does anybody have that same? Anybody have that experience? I don't know if that's unique to me. All right, so I just put that out there. And women look more at men's eyes and hair. Now, the other thing is, I don't think they were allowed to look at anything but, the face. So that's a little limiting. But yeah, I like looking at mouths. I think there's something to that science. Men tend to look where they're allowed to look. Well, you probably heard that Governor Newsom of California wants to work with Trump to make film great again in California. So Newsom has floated the idea of a $7.5 billion federal tax credit for filmmakers, to which I asked the following question. Why would filmmakers need an enormous tax credit in order to make films in California? I can only think of one reason. The reason would be that California has high taxes and high problems that they've sort of artificially created. Just everything's more expensive, and the state is just slamming you in every possible way. And you got to watch out for harming the endangered frogs, and you got to make sure you've got DEI covered. Why would the federal government want to cover the mistakes of the state? And then beyond that, if you have to pay for the industry to exist, maybe that industry shouldn't exist. Maybe that industry should figure out how to make movies more inexpensively. Now, I do know that there are, other countries that give big tax breaks. I guess they think they make their money back because there's a lot of activity that goes on. But I don't automatically think subsidizing the movie industry to go back to the place that they ran from, even though it's my state and it'd be good for me. I don't know. And then I see that the people in favor of it are Governor Newsom and Adam Schiff. If Adam Schiff is in favor of it, it just automatically feels like a bad idea. So I don't know. Good luck with that. Well, the White House has picked a new Surgeon General, whose name is Dr. Casey Means. And I guess there was somebody else that had been nominated. It was been withdrawn. But Trump said that this Dr. Casey Means has impeccable MAHA credentials, and she'll work well with RFK Jr. You know, if RFK Jr. thinks she's the right choice and Trump's happy with her, that's probably good enough. When was the last time the Surgeon General made a big difference in the world? There was a time when the Surgeon General said cigarette smoking is bad, and then that got on the cigarette packs, so that was pretty important. But when was the last time you remember the Surgeon General made a difference? Do you remember, was it Jocelyn Elders, who was a Surgeon General under, I don't remember who, but she got in trouble for saying that masturbation was good for you. And those were simpler times, to which I say, probably it is. And she got in trouble for saying that. I can't remember if she said, because she was a black woman, I can't remember if she was talking about black women or women in general, but she said that women weren't getting enough exercise because they worried about their hair. Do you remember that? And then everybody mocked her and said, come on, they're not worried about their hair. And then there were surveys done. Turns out women don't exercise as much because it's just a huge pain in the butt to get their hair right. If you don't have the timing right, you can't do exercise and have good hair at the same time. And I thought, wow, she was like right on target. So Jocelyn Elders, in my view, was sort of the superstar of Surgeon Generals, because she said what people didn't want to hear and they weren't ready to hear, but it was right. So I always had a lot of respect for her. I saw there was some pushback from some smart people saying that they didn't think that Dr. Casey Means was sufficiently qualified. But I feel like a medical doctor is probably qualified, especially if they're in the MAHA camp. So I'm going to be open-minded about that one. The Stanford Review, which I believe is a student publication in Stanford, they did their own research, and they found that China is running this enormous spy operation in Stanford, which suggests it's probably in every major U.S. college institution. And the way it works is that if you're a Chinese student whose nationality is Chinese, but it's also your country that you were born in. So not Americans. We're not talking about Asian Americans. We're talking about people who are going to school here and then they're going to go back to China. Apparently, those students, even if they didn't want to be spies, they're forced to be spies. And every single one of them seems to have a handler, according to the Stanford Review. And the handler not only makes sure that they spy, but even directs them into which classes and things they should get involved in. So the Chinese government would say, all right, for example, I'm just making this up. They'd say, for example, all right, AI is critically important to China's future. So you're going to sign up for the AI class. Well, I don't want to sign up for the AI class. Well, you're going to sign up for the AI class. All right. And you're going to tell us everything that you learn. So, don't you assume that this is what's happening in every major college institution? I don't see that there's any way to stop it except for removing all those students. Because the students are guilty, but I would say they're operating under duress. I doubt there's even one student who thinks, "Oh, I love doing this. This sure is fun being a spy." I'll bet they just want to enjoy the college experience and learn their stuff and go on with their lives. So, but in any case, they probably pay a lot for their tuition compared to other people. So it's going to be tough to do anything about that. Well, did you see the announcement from OMG, the O'Keefe Media Group? James O'Keefe scored another big one, and he's got some undercover video of a very close confidant to Prince Andrew, and the very drunken close confidant who was actually living with Prince Andrew's ex-wife and raising his kids. And he wasn't just close, he was as close as you could get. Like, he was right in the middle of it. So this is somebody who definitely knows what was up. And according to him, in his drunken babbling, he said that he confirmed that Prince Andrew was involved with Epstein and having sex with underage females. Now, on one hand, that is a pretty amazing undercover discovery. And on the other hand, it's the only thing about Epstein that I was sure I already knew. Did anybody have that feeling? Now, just because it wasn't 100% confirmed that Prince Andrew had some sex with at least one person, was it Virginia Joffrey who was making that claim? I forget, who recently passed away. But did you think it was just one? And did you think, I mean, it's the only thing I knew about Epstein that I was completely certain I knew the whole story, which was Prince Andrew was a client of Epstein's or just a friend. But wouldn't you have been more surprised to find out that he wasn't doing it? I think it was exactly what it looked like, and we all knew it for a long time. So on one hand, an amazing get to get the confirmation. On the other hand, why does all this Epstein seem like we keep getting teased that we're going to hear something new, and it's always something we already knew? Like, when is the first new thing going to be dropped? I don't know. But still, big accomplishment. Congratulations to O'Keefe. Apparently, the big victory that Trump got over the Houthis, getting them to say that they'll stop attacking shipping in the Red Sea, might be limited in its actual real-world value because the shippers say, we don't quite trust the Houthis. Now, how many times have I told you that if you want to know what reality is, look at whatever the insurance companies are doing? And I said to myself, as soon as I heard that the Houthis had claimed that they would stop attacking, I said to myself, but will the insurance companies believe it? Because if the insurance companies don't believe it, the ships are just not going to go there because they can't get insured. So I don't know if it's strictly because of insurance problems or if the shippers on their own are just saying, maybe we'll wait and see on this a little bit. But there should be an advantage coming up at some point, but it won't be fast. However, it does make it look like Trump got a big victory before he does his Middle East trip, which is upcoming. So politically, terrific. Practically, I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. Well, here's the big good news, if I can call it that. Apparently, the U.S. and the U.K. are going to announce a trade deal today. It's probably being announced right now. I think it happens right now. And the idea is that we've reached some kind of an agreement. Now, I guess we didn't have it wasn't the hardest of our trade deals because there wasn't that much in dispute. And I don't know the details of it yet. But if both sides are happy, that probably means there's some advantage to the U.S. And that's probably why the stocks are up in part. All right. Just looking at one of your comments there. So you remember I told you that the most predictable thing is that the press is going to slam Trump on his whole tariff fiasco and the chaos. But as soon as the deals start coming in, oh, here we go. Zero Hedge is reporting that the U.S. is going to cut tariffs on UK-made cars. The UK makes cars to 10%, and the U.S.-UK deals to cut beef tariffs to close to zero. Beef tariffs? In which direction? I guess our beef to them. But isn't the problem that they don't like our beef because it has hormones? Well, so the next thing I was going to tell you, I guess that comment got ahead of me a little bit, is that the most predictable thing that's going to happen is that the Democrat media is going to say, well, we looked at the details of this agreement, and obviously this agreement is not as good as Trump says, and it's not going to help in the real world, and things were going to go that direction anyway, and he's saying it's a big deal, but it's really no big deal. So the first few are going to get poo-pooed by the liberal media, the anti-Trump media. You should expect that. But they can't do it to all of them. If they just keep happening, if India comes online pretty soon and, maybe South Korea and Japan, there's going to be a point where it's unambiguously true that the whole tariff thing worked. And then the media is going to have to figure out something else to talk about because there are going to be, over 100 of them. The news will be almost every day. Well, we got another one, and it's good for America in 3 different ways. So, and this will all happen before the midterms. So Trump may have pulled off. It's way too early to say this, way too early, but you can see the glimmer of it. He may have pulled off the greatest political economic move of all time. Way too early to say that, but it's starting to signal in that direction because, all the chaos stuff seems to be dissipating, and now it's turning into, there must be serious people sitting around the table making serious deals that are actually good for America. And that's exactly what's happening. So I don't think yet that the media has accepted the fact that Trump knows what he's doing and that creating all that ambiguity and what they call the chaos, but somebody else would call uncertainty, caused the entire world to want to make a deal really fast. There's nothing else that could have done that. There's no amount of begging, writing well-worded memos, nothing. There's nothing else that could have gotten all the major trading partners to get on an airplane and literally fly out here and say, can we do this right away? Can we make a better deal? Only Trump could do that. And only the way he did it, probably. There probably wasn't a second way in all the world. There was probably not any other way that this could have been done. And it's starting. It's too early to say. Anything could go wrong. but it's starting to look like he pulled off one of the greatest moves I've ever seen. Way too early to know that for sure, but boy, does it look like it. We'll see. Well, meanwhile, Jerome Powell at the Fed is not looking to lower rates anytime soon, and he's claiming it's because of the uncertainty over the tariffs and that the tariffs might cause inflation. And he doesn't want to have inflation and at the same time that he's lowering interest rates. I don't think he's making the right choice because it feels political. Now, of course, the Fed is supposed to be famously non-political, but I don't see how he could be because Trump has been on his ass so hard. I feel like I just don't trust him. I just don't trust that his reasoning is without political bias, and that's a problem. Now, you could say that maybe Trump is the one that caused the political bias, but I'm not so sure because there's an anti-Trump sort of bias that's everywhere all the time anyway. So I wonder if Trump had never said a thing about, to criticize the Fed, would that make the Fed person more MAGA? I don't think so. Would it make the head of the Fed think I can't go in polite company if I help Trump with my rate cuts? I feel like the social and political pressure on the head of the Fed would sort of cause them to want to be anti-Trump, even if they weren't naturally anti-Trump, for their own lifestyle. But I would argue that all Trump needs is for those rate cuts to happen before the midterms. And there's plenty of time for that. And I think that they will. Because if the tariff negotiations go well for the next 6 months, and especially if we get something happening with China, and all that needs to happen with China is that we agree on a pause while we work on a deal. That could be enough. And a pause on tariffs until we work on a deal. So I feel like Trump is setting up the midterms really well. There should be a rate cut, and there should be a whole bunch of tariff deals done by then. He's going to be hard to beat, or at least the Republicans are going to be hard to beat. Well, I was reading Mario Nawfal news summary, which I recommend, by the way. His news summaries are terrific on X. That DOGE has put together some software to make it easier to fire government employees. So you know how everything is too complicated? But apparently it was sort of complicated to just fire anybody. So they figured out how to do a high-speed system for firing federal workers. Now, apparently over 260,000 government employees have already been let go because of DOGE's work. Did you know that? That snuck up on me. 260,000 have already been let go. And then this will make it easier. And apparently there's a whole bunch of others who were targeted. So we expect the IRS to cut 40% of its staff and maybe the VA to cut 80,000. And I guess the ultimate source of this is Reuters. Wow. Now, here's a story that you've probably already heard. I think I've mentioned it. But I can't stop going back to it because it's blowing my brain. That according to Scott Bessent in the Treasury, over 1/3 of the payments that were issued by the Treasury in the recent past can't be tracked back to the appropriations to find out if they were allowed and appropriate expenses. 1/3. And keep in mind that all of the government's expenses go through the Treasury, and 1/3 did not have a code on them to say what it was about. So you couldn't even judge whether they were allowed or not. So now that's been changed. And again, I'm going to say that this might be DOGE's biggest win meaning that if expenses in the government suddenly and inexplicably go down over the next year and a half, isn't it going to look like all the fraudsters knew that they would get caught, so they stopped doing it? Is it possible that even if they couldn't catch the fraud because the fraud was hidden too well, that if they set up a mechanism to catch it in the future, is it possible that we'll see this gigantic drop in expenses that nobody even understands? Like, we don't know why it went down. If that happens, and some of it happens before the midterm, oh my God. Now, again, that I'm being super optimistic, but I can't believe that a third of the payments went without some kind of a payment code and there wasn't a great deal of fraud going on. It's hard to imagine there was anything else going on. But also DOGE news, Libs of TikTok is talking about this on X. DOGE announced that they ended 522 contracts worth $285 million in just the last 2 days. Now, how do you terminate 522 contracts in the last 2 days? I have a theory that they did it by the title, because it would be pretty hard to really dig into all those contracts and talk to all the players, the buyers and the sellers, and to find out if it's appropriate. But but here's one that they canceled. One of the contracts included 181,000 USDA contract for, and this is the title of what the contract is: Technical Climate Advisor for Central Africa. Would you feel that you needed to do a deep dive before you cut that? I wouldn't. I would just look at the title. Do we need a technical climate advisor for Central Africa? No? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm going to go with no. So it might be entirely possible that you could get rid of 522 contracts just by reading the titles and figuring out how much you laughed. If you laughed uncontrollably at just the title, that should be enough to cut it. I'd be perfectly happy with that standard. Why'd you cut it? We read the title and we couldn't stop laughing. Okay, good enough. That's all the research I need. Well, the Center Square is reporting that there was a failed vote to try to require voter ID in Michigan. Now, I guess all the Republicans voted to require voter ID, and all the Democrats voted no. So the thing failed. It fell 16 votes short. And my question is this: if this is genuine curiosity, so that's going to prevent me from getting Alzheimer's, my curiosity. I'm actually curious about this. What do the normal Democrats think about this? Because the far left, really, the ones who are really dug in, they're going to be in favor of any crazy thing that, as long as they can keep power. But if you were just a normal Democrat, not an elected official, and not one of the crazy progressives, just a normal Democrat. Let's take Bill Maher. Take Bill Maher, for example, a normal Democrat. What's he think about the fact that 100% of the Democrats don't want voter ID? Like, how do you possibly process that other than fraud and wanting to promote fraud? Because there's no normal Democrat who believes that Black Americans can't get an ID. We've literally never found even one. So do they just sort of say to themselves, well, as long as it's defeating the Nazis, it's okay? And then how normal would you be if you thought you were fighting Nazis? It wouldn't be very normal at all. So does anybody know I've never asked any normal Democrat that question, but I can't believe that a normal person, no matter what side of the politics are, would a normal person think you shouldn't have ID to vote in America? I don't think so, right? Doesn't it seem to you that the normal ones need to just sort of avoid the question? It's good for their team, so they probably like, well, I'll worry about other things. So I'd love to see the press talk to normal Republicans, not elected ones, and just say, what do you think about this? Did you know that your team voted 100% to not have good security for elections? What would they say? Genuinely curious. Here's some good news for America. According to The Hill, Trump signed an executive order on apprenticeships. So apprenticeships were already, I guess we had quite a bit of them, 680,000. He wants to get that up to 1 million. But there was a bigger thing that was part of the executive order, which might be helpful, is that apparently our I guess our federal standards for these apprenticeships included a whole bunch of fragmented federal workforce entities doing their own thing. So it was a big confused, duplicative process. And so a big part of the executive order is reducing the duplication and simplifying the whole how do you get an apprentice kind of thing. So that's perfect. So they want to identify workforce development and education programs that are ineffective and get rid of those, but just basically make the system work for the first time, or work better, really. At the same time, so you could think of this as more the realization that college isn't for everybody, and that especially if we have more manufacturing coming back to America, you're going to need lots of people who can just do practical things, and they don't need to read Shakespeare to do it. So I'm glad the government sort of understands, the reality of the world that way. However, it's even better. Google apparently has launched an ambitious program, this is according to Clean Technica, to train 100,000 electrical workers for the AI-powered future. So I assume that means 100,000 electrical workers to help them set up more and more data centers. And they're also going to train people. They're looking to train a whole bunch of people in AI. So they're using AI to train them, but also training them in AI. So Google is getting really aggressive in training people that they're going to use in their own workforce, which again requires no college. It just requires the right directed, high quality training. And it aims to equip up to 1 million Americans with AI skills separately from the electrical stuff. So good for Google. So of course they're doing it for their own company reasons. They need this kind of workers, and they need a lot of them, and they're going to train them. And then the third thing, these are all related things, but they strongly suggest a theme or a pattern that's going in the right direction. So the post-millennials talking about this. Apparently, U.S. companies are looking to recruit workers in high school. Almost like a sports team is trying to recruit from college usually. And the reason is that if they wait, they won't get enough employees. So between the demographic problem where there are not enough young people being born, and now it'll probably be exacerbated by the reduction in immigration. Apparently, high schoolers who are 16 and 17 years old are being directly contacted by major corporations in their area to see if they can get them interested in working in their company as soon as they graduate. And some of these jobs pay over $50,000 right out of high school. I think it could be as high as $70,000 per year for trade jobs. And so imagine being 17 years old, and maybe you're not heading for college, and you've got these companies trying to recruit you, and they're offering you, a good starting salary. You still have to live at home on that salary, I think, but that's pretty impressive. So that's a good adjustment. So I guess in at least three different ways: the government, Google, and all these smaller manufacturing companies. And imagine how much of that they're going to need when manufacturing is, really pulling back into America. Um, what this suggests to me is that America is doing its America thing, which is it's reading the future and making the adjustments it needs to make. And this is exactly the adjustment we need to make. And you're seeing it in three different domains, which suggests it's now a universal, understood, accepted thing that we just got to figure out how to get non-college students into the jobs that make sense for the business as well as the student. Anyway, apparently the U.S. is doing more spying on Greenland as part of our effort to take over their country. And I think it's hilarious that it's not really secret. So apparently the U.S. says Trump has ordered that the spy networks start gathering more information about Greenland. Specifically, they're looking to find out who in Greenland might be in favor of joining up with America and which ones are not. Now, you might say, and they would use, their various spy apparatus for doing that, which would be electronic stuff that we intercept, and maybe we have some people on the ground asking questions, but we wouldn't talk about that. So it's kind of hilarious that we just say out loud, all right, Greenland, we're going to be doing a little spying as step one to taking over your country. And that's what we're doing. Now, this would be step one of a color revolution, wouldn't it? Now, the color revolution has the usual steps. It's the thing we do to other countries, where the first thing we do is figure out who would be on our side, who we could work with, and then we fund them or help them become heads of organizations and have a louder voice in their own country. And then maybe we pay for some protests on the streets to make it look like, oh, the public really wants this. It's a popular uprising. And then we might see if we can control the media. So if you turned on the television in Greenland, it would say, people really want independence, meaning joining America. People really want this. And so then the public would start to think that there's this gigantic, natural, organic movement toward whatever the thing is, but it's really just driven by us. Now, I don't know how far we would go in this so-called color revolution, but but the fact that it's public knowledge that we're increasing our spy campaign to figure out which of the locals are on our side. It's kind of hilarious, so we don't even try to hide it. It's just fully transparent. Anyway, Tulsi Gabbard issued a collection emphasis message to the intelligence agencies to collect as much information as possible. Now, I'm genuinely curious, what is the breakdown in the actual public? Because I think it depends how the question gets asked. I think there's a way to ask the question where the locals would say, hell no. And there's probably a way to phrase the question where the locals would say, maybe, or even yes. So you have to be careful how you ask the question. That's all. Well, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the fentanyl question is a key to the fact that the U.S. and China are going to be talking about trade when some of our people are in Switzerland for other reasons. Well, China was going to be in Switzerland for other reasons, and we decided to meet them there to talk about it. I think that happens this weekend. Now, the way it's being reported by the Wall Street Journal is that China started using the fentanyl opening as a way to sort of get things moving because we were stuck and they didn't quite know how to unstick things. But they thought if they could just ask some questions about fentanyl, and the questions were, what exactly do you want us to do? Which is a good first question. So I've been fascinated watching China navigate the dignity part of this, where Trump acted like a big bully, and then China, quite reasonably, said, you can't bully us. So this can't look like bullying or it's going nowhere. But how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that frame? Well, you have people meet in Switzerland instead of the US or China. That's a good start because it seems like, all right, well, that's, it's just Switzerland, and it just doesn't seem like it's a direct thing. And then you have them asking, well, what would you like us to do about fentanyl? As if it's just a separate, unrelated, perfectly reasonable question, which it is. And apparently the U.S. answer is that, among other things, they want China to send the message out to the makers of the fentanyl precursors that the penalties will be severe. Now, I don't know if that's ever going to happen because I don't think China is actually serious about stopping the flow of fentanyl. I don't think they're serious at all. But if it at least gets us to talk about the other trade stuff, maybe it served some weird purpose there. Maybe. But meanwhile, the big question is whose economy is going to blink first? Is the U.S. going to have more problems because of these tariffs, or is China? And the one thing I can tell you about the Chinese economy, I don't believe any story about the Chinese economy. I feel like you could read a story that says, from somebody who seems to be an expert, that China is ready to collapse any moment now. And they'll give pretty good reasons. Well, you got this bubble and you got this demographic problem, and you got all these factories that are closing and the workers are not getting paid. And it sounds pretty good. And you say to yourself, all right, looks like China can't hang, so they're going to have to make a deal. And then 5 years later, China will still be there cooking along. And I don't feel anybody knows anything about China. And of course, we can't believe any numbers that come out of it. So you have to be careful. But here's something that Zero Hedge was saying. According to Zero Hedge, the last cargo ships from China are arriving in the U.S. ports that won't have a tariff. So apparently, if you were already at sea and you were shipping stuff to the U.S., that would not be covered by the extra high Trump tariffs. So those are just coming into the docks now. So if you bought anything after that, it might be, part of shortages or whatever. So if some of those shortages really hurt, it's going to cost China more than they know, meaning that it's one thing if I can't get $30, but one of the things we might not be able to get is ibuprofen, because apparently it's most of the ibuprofen. There would be other pharma products that might be a problem too, but if I don't get ibuprofen, which is the only thing keeping me alive right now, I'm really going to be mad. So China has to manage not just the products and the tariffs and the economy. I mean, it's a lot to manage. but they have to manage how we feel about it. And there are going to be some products that if they hold back on them or somehow they're delayed, I don't know if Trump is going to get the blame for that. I think we're going to blame China. But there was a data that, again, you have to be careful about believing any data about the Chinese economy. But here's what Zero Hedge said, and this surprised me. That since 2018, U.S. imports from China have dropped from 21% of total goods to 13%. Did you know that? That in 2018, 21% of our total goods came from China, but that's dropped all the way to 13%. What was it that happened in 2018 that would have changed that number so drastically starting in 2018? Does anybody know? So this is a question for my regular viewers, people who have been with me since 2018. Does anybody know what happened in 2018 that could have been the start of something really bad for the Chinese economy? I'm not going to answer that question, but the people who follow me on Locals, they know what I'm talking about. And you never know. Hey, maybe we live in a big old simulation, and maybe things that you didn't think were connected, maybe they're more connected than you thought. You never know. All right. Apparently, NVIDIA shares are expected to go up because Trump administration is going to end some chip export restrictions. I guess the restrictions were developed by the Biden administration, but they were supposed to go into effect on the 15th of this month. And they were sort of complicated and stupid. So the Trump administration is looking to simplify them, which would be good for NVIDIA. And CNBC is reporting on that. So it's not a change in the tariffs or anything. It simply has more to do with America deciding which of our technologies we should allow other countries to have access to. And Trump is just going to simplify that. So that's good news. All right, this is really funny. This is a story on Twitchy. Even Pete Buttigieg is saying that it was too hard to build things in America because of excessive regulations. Now, do you think the excessive regulations came from Republicans? Do you think he's complaining about all the Republican-led excessive regulations? Well, I'm going to read to you some of the wording of the regulations that made it hard for Buttigieg to build any infrastructure. Because as you know, he completely failed in building any infrastructure. So this is going to sound like a joke. It'll sound like stand-up comedy, but I swear this is the real language from the government. So apparently, shortly after Biden took office, he signed an executive order mandating that the beneficiaries of 40% of all federal climate and environmental programs should come from underserved communities. If they said nothing else, that would have stopped all progress. Because it would be nothing but fighting over who the underserved communities are. Since it's vague, all the people who said, I'm underserved, no, I'm underserved. So, that would have killed progress right there, but it gets better. The order, so again, this is Biden, established the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, which monitors agencies such as the Department of Transportation. And it was to ensure, this is a quote, that voices, perspective, and lived realities of communities with environmental justice concerns are heard in the White House and reflected in federal policies, investments, and decisions. So, how would you like to be a company that builds stuff and you run into that buzzsaw? Boss, did you know about this? What? Yeah, what? We're applying for that big grant so we can build that thing that they want to be built. Yeah, yeah. And we know how to build things, and we'll have the money to do it. So we're good to go, right? Well, but only if we hear the voices, perspectives, and lived realities of the communities with environmental justice concerns that are reflected in federal policies, investments, and decisions. And that in order to qualify for the grant, the applicants must, quote, demonstrate how meaningful public involvement inclusive of disadvantaged communities will occur throughout a project's life cycle. So you can't even like do a big thing in the beginning. It's better for you to make sure that it's spread out over the life cycle of the project. And apparently the phrases like public involvement are all unclear, so you don't know if you've got enough. But it should involve, quote, intentional outreach to underserved communities. So who gets to decide if there's enough and if you were intentional enough? But wait, I'm not even to the good stuff yet. You ready for this? According to the Department of Transportation, the outreach to these underserved communities can take the form of, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. The outreach to these communities could take the forms of games and contests, visual preference surveys, or neighborhood block parties, so long as the grant recipient provides, quote, multilingual staff or interpreters to interact with community members who use languages other than English. So do you have any questions about why the Biden administration didn't get anything built? the the incompetence that's layered in this, it goes beyond just, oh my God, it's bad. It's actually just funny to read their actual words. Anybody who's been in any kind of a real business, you could never satisfy these requirements, because as long as they're vague, it allows everybody who says they're in an underserved situation to say, you haven't done enough for me. So no matter how much you're going to do, somebody's going to say, you didn't do enough for me. All right. I guess President Xi is meeting with Putin. I think that's today. I saw the video. I think it was today. Maybe it was yesterday. And he's there because there's the big Victory Day parade that's happening that Putin is putting on. And I didn't realize that Putin has connected everything from Hitler to the Ukraine war and has always framed it. I guess I knew this, but somehow you forget about it. You forget that Putin has always said that what he was doing in Ukraine was getting rid of the Nazis. And then I look at the United States and, the Democrats want to get rid of the Nazis too. Like, we're still fighting the Nazis. And Putin apparently is making that work because he's selling that version that he's just denazifying the world. And he's trying to get President Xi to help, I guess. So Xi will join the celebration of getting rid of the Nazis, according to them. Well, as you know, India and Pakistan are lobbing weapons at each other, artillery in one direction and missiles and drones in the other direction. But you heard there was an enormous dogfight. Did you hear that news? So both Pakistan and India had a large number of jets in the air who were directly fighting each other, and they called it a dogfight. And then uh, later we find out that they stayed on their own side of the border. So none of the Indian jets went into Pakistan, and none of the Pakistani jets went into India. But they had an enormous multi-hour dogfight. So does that raise any questions with you? Like, what the hell kind of a dogfight is it if you're not even in the same country at the same time? And the answer is they were shooting things from, I don't know, over 100 miles away. So it was all long range attacks. So I guess the Indian jets were just sort of circling on their side of the border, and the Pakistanis were on their side of the border, and not even close. They were, hundreds of miles away. And somebody would launch a missile, and sometimes it would hit, and sometimes it wouldn't, I guess. So that was a dogfight. But it does suggest that they're both very serious about not escalating. So that's the good news. I don't think you would spend that much energy making sure you never cross the border with your jet. At the time when you're basically at war, and still you're not going to cross the border. That's pretty serious indication that you don't want to escalate. You just want to make sure you've made your point that you can't mess with us. And I guess they both made the point that you can't mess with us or there will be problems. So that's where that went. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got for today. Thanks for joining. If you're on YouTube or Rumble or X, I'm going to talk to the people on Locals platform privately now in about 30 seconds. And the rest of you, thanks for joining. Hope you come back tomorrow, same time, same place. All the good news that's happening.